Alright guys, TacticalRab here again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. After an interesting weekend of Call of Duty, lots of reaction to the skill gap between the top teams and the weaker teams in the CDL. There's been talk recently from Scrappy and others. How does this era of the league compare to what was happening back in the day? Is it harder to win nowadays? Is it easier to win nowadays? Lots of talk on the fact that the bottom teams in the league right now are arguably the worst that we have basically ever had in competitive Call of Duty history. These guys are getting slapped around on the daily and are simply not trying, it seems, to actually improve substantially. What's the reaction here? What do they need to do about it going forwards? Because Kenny and Sasha certainly have their thoughts on the competitiveness right now of this league. Very much intrigued to your perspective in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all here, oiled up Doug St. Martin. I probably just sweated up Doug St. Martin to be fair. Is talking about making the challenge, of course, for the world record for the pull-ups. Now he was asked the question, just thought it was kind of interesting. Are you coming back for Black Ops 6, right? At least you make it the competitive COD return. I'm not going to lie. If there was any time for Doug to come in, like now is the time. Like it's now or never, right? It's obviously not going to happen now because Doug's obviously doing the pull-ups and stuff. But look, you got to wonder, this Boston team is trash. And, like, it can't get any worse with Doug, can it? Can it get any worse? I don't know. Doug says, though, I ain't coming back in. I'm not making the competitive return. I'm going to stay retired. Time to let the younger guys do their thing. Let's look at some of the numbers, though, on the positive side. Top 5 overall KDs so far. Some of these teams only played one game, to be fair. But actually, it seems most of the players we're going to look at over the coming minutes actually have played a couple of games. Ghosty is topping the lot with a 1.21 so far. HyDra's here with a 1.2. So some usual suspects, and I would expect this to, you know, Cellium will probably get up here at some point, but that's not been the case, interestingly enough, so far at this stage. Johnny, very impressive, you got to say, for Johnny. We talked about him earlier today, but the fact that he's played Toronto and OpTic, and he's got a 1.2 is actually really well done. So, and I think his POV, like the eye test, works there. Sure, he's not a Purge-esque player in terms of what he's going to do in the comms and these other things, but, you know, it's a bit of a slayer, brings the energy, brings the aggression to the team, and it seems to be working for them. They're probably going to be quite inconsistent, but I think certainly better than where they were with a seam. These are some of the other numbers. Okay, we've already looked at these ones. We've got hardpoint KD, HyDra, 1.4. Like, I mean, the couple of hardpoint maps he had the other day against Ravens were frankly ridiculous. Johnny's at a 1.4 as well. Simp is here. Ghosty is here. Insight is here, actually, which is, you know, maybe a bit of a welcome change for Insight with how he's been performing lately. S&D KD, however, Cellium does make an appearance here with a 1.6. Snoopy, it's kind of crazy, isn't it, given Boston Surge. Kremp, Fame, but Hook is topping the lot right now for the Seattle Surge. Kind of reminiscent of their early season form where they were really good in Search and Destroy. That doesn't seem to be changing. This is Control KD, though again, we see aBeZy getting onto the list here. Certainly Rookie of the Year candidate, I would say, at the moment. Drazah, though, is topping the lot, which is crazy to think that for FaZe, given where they've been over the last few years. Drazah, I know that he had that ridiculous map yesterday for the loss, but he has a 1.5 so far this stage in Control, and none of the other FaZe players are even on here. So kind of remarkable to think about on that one. But we've got to talk about, especially on the Boston side and these other teams, just how bad some of these teams actually are. Because, as I say at the start of the video, there's been talk on the competitiveness. There's been talk on, well, back in the day, they were just playing plumbers, so the victories don't count. And there is an argument to say there were fewer truly, like, great teams at the top of the standings. Like, if you look back in, you know, the Complexity Dynasty, the OpTic Dynasty, in the terms of the top rosters that they were playing against, were there as good teams in that ballpark as there are today, with FaZe, OpTic, Toronto, New York? Possibly not, although I think you can make the argument at certain times in COD history. The argument that can certainly be made, though, is that, sure, back in the day, some of the players that were playing, you know, weren't necessarily as good as they are today in terms of pure ability, but that doesn't necessarily take away from that was the era at the time. And as Big T obviously famously said, all you can do is push against kind of the ceiling of that particular era. And there's an argument to say that nowadays, some of these teams further down the league are actually even worse than they used to be, because at least back then, they would try. The players would try and win, and even the bad teams would have that mentality because they weren't getting paid a massive salary. And this is the point that often comes around that a lot of the OGs talk about. And I'm not saying there's a clear solution to this. It's probably a good thing in some ways, like the fact that the league is more sustainable now for more players, but it does create byproducts, right? That certain players, it's the same thing that people say about, you know, Tottenham Hotspur in the English Premier League, that, you know, they'd be happy with fourth type thing. And yeah, even Mourinho talks about this all of the time. And look, they're getting paid good money. It is what it is. And it's now kind of the same thing in the CDL. Of course, Zuma was making the point as well, though, that they're not really getting paid that much money. Like, let's say you want 100 grand and maybe you can maintain that roster spot for a couple of years. That's not really, after taxes, that's not exactly setting you up for life, is it? Unless you're a streamer as well on the side. Certainly not if you're living in LA or New York or whatever, and of course the cost of living in those places. So the point really is, nowadays they're getting paid a salary, they don't care so much about winning, it's more about maintaining their job, which I think is definitely true in some parts. And this is what Parasite says. This is the worst the league has ever been in terms of skill. Not necessarily in terms of the raw skill potential of the players. I think that is actually in a very good spot. But it's more like the team themselves. How skillful are they as a team, right? As team cohesion, these other factors. Maybe it is the worst it's ever been because, you know, I don't really remember a league quite like this where the teams at the bottom just look so woeful. Now, to be fair, this weekend was a bit of an exception in some ways because we got some upset victories. Toronto go down to Surge, although Surge are actually legit. But there's some teams down there, Minnesota, Boston, just awful, right? And these guys don't even seem to be trying to improve, not playing eights, bad roster compositions, no grinders. Like, it really should be no surprise, I think, that Drazah as a player, after being one of the biggest grinders in the scene for the last couple of seasons, has risen to the top, right? Like, you know, that's how it's gone for Draz. He's put in more time than basically anyone. He's obviously a very talented player, and that was evident back in MW19 when he came in from OpTic in Los Angeles. But certainly as a player, going from where he was in, you know, Cold War for Los Angeles Thieves to where he is today, shows just how much reward he has got for all the hard work that he has put in. And that's showing because he's now on FaZe. He's winning championships, and, you know, he's winning events with those guys and getting paid a lot of money to do so. That's the type of mentality these guys need. There's a few of them out there. Maybe Gwyn we've talked about as a bit of a grinder. There's other players as well, but there aren't that many in the grand scheme of things. And obviously Slash is joking about it as well, saying, you know, just throw talent on a roster together. I'm sure that it'll work out. So maybe indicating that some of the roster decisions he's seen have not necessarily been the best over the last couple of years. Caliber of teams, he says, now are so much worse. And most people don't even understand how to get better. Only a few in the league get it, and it's only going to continue to get worse if that does not change. So Kenny decides to get involved as well. Of course, in hindsight, Kenny says this and then goes on to lose to Vegas later in the day. But whatever, the point I think is still in large part valid. This year, nobody plays for the win more than any other year. So saying that it's effectively worse than it's ever been. I don't know what it is about this game, but most teams do not play to win. So even if they did play, I don't know if they would learn how to even get better. Bro, I'm telling you, the last game brain rotted people. Surge got better because they actually try. And this is a point that, you know, I've been making now for a little bit of time as Surge have got better. Like, you watch Surge play, like, not only are they, you know, they've got their own style, they play to their strength as a team, they seem to actually want to improve, and listen to their comms, like, they're trying to win, you know, it's a miracle. Like, I'm seeing a team outside of the top 4 that you watch their play, you listen to their play, and you feel like they're trying to win. It was the same point that was made against Miami Heretics. Sure, Miami, solid team now, they're looking better, but they're not quite on Seattle Surge's level, but despite having in some ways a relatively similar playstyle. And you can see in some of their reactions, you know, Dashy was roasting them hard actually at the major because they beat FaZe on one map. They didn't beat FaZe, OpTic beat FaZe, but Miami beat FaZe on a single map on the 6-star Surge. And after the series, Miami seems pretty satisfied that they'd beaten FaZe on a map. It's like, you know, maybe that's not the right mentality. But some teams will have that mentality. Oh, well done, we won a map against the top 4 teams. Pat on the back and let's move onwards. As Kenny says, definitely people still play with no mini-map. I'm convinced, he says. So he reckons that some of these players are completely clueless. So just wanted to share here what, you know, the boys on the flank had to say about this. Certainly Parasite, because he had a lot to say, and I think for good reason.
I watch these fucking matches every single day, and I'm just absolutely appalled at the state of the league. I said this is probably the least talented league we've had. People can argue that some of the players are talented, sure, but when I talk about talent, I talk about everything. Like, it encompasses everything. It doesn't just encompass shooting straight and moving. It encompasses everything: moving, making decisions, etc., etc. I don't know what the fuck happened from the last couple of years, maybe going from Modern Warfare 2 to coming to this game, but I genuinely feel like the last game brain rotted the absolute living hell out of a lot of the competitors. Seattle, you know, they made a lot of improvements, but it's clear to me that from watching them play, the reason why this team is just so much better now is because they actually just make efforts on the map to do things as a team and just literally like be aggressive. Like, they're not doing anything that much special than other teams can do. They're just trying. You watch other teams play, and it genuinely blows my mind that these teams practice every day. because they don't take advantage of any situations. It genuinely feels like some of them are clueless. They're not reading fucking spawns properly. They don't know the timing of like when they can go places. It genuinely feels like they either don't know what the fuck is going on the map, or they are literally like scared, and it blows my mind. And Kenny's even basically reiterating it, basically saying no one plays for the win, which to a degree he's right, because no one is willing to take proper risk on the map to even put themselves in a situation of flip. They're just content with being at deficits and not trying to change like the tide of a game.
But I really do believe the fact that the league is so top heavy is the reason. Like these bottom 8 teams, that's what, 32 players. All 32 of those players know they cannot win. They know it.
Dude, if you ask people back in the day, like what they wanted most to win, to achieve, is like they wanted to be the best in the world. They wanted to win championships. Bro, I genuinely think there are probably players in the league, like, and obviously people can say it, but obviously the amount of work you put in, your mentality, all that stuff, that is what truly shows what you want. People will tell you they want to win championships. People say they want to win, but when you look at like the way people like the way people practice, the amount of work people put in, et cetera, do they actually want to win? Like everyone can say it, but how many people actually want to? What happened to that mentality, bro? Everyone, even like the shitters back in the day, were literally trying to play to win.
They're also, and I say this all the time, we talk about team environments, and Scrap talked about on stream. Those top teams are also so good at making their practice worthwhile every single day. Like they do not waste days of practice. And what I've heard about some of these bottom 8 teams is day to day. If the practice is worth it, people get on and just waste 4 or 5 hours. Those for those top teams, Chris, if they waste a day, it's literally a 2-hour inquest afterwards, usually between the coaches and a bunch of people of like, wow, we just straight trolled a day of scrims. Like, we're not going to do that again.
And as Bance and Kenny say here in the replies, I think this is bang on the money here from Bance as well. And I think it's true in general with the way that we discuss the league. If I'm a player on a team, I'm not having the mentality that it's impossible to win. And it's the same if I'm a coach or if I'm whatever. Like, we have seen great teams, even, FaZe Vanguard, go down to the likes of the Los Angeles Guerrillas, go down to all sorts of teams. Like, it can happen. Obviously, on LAN, it's a bit of a different story, but Vegas beat OpTic yesterday. These things can happen. It is possible to make a run, and it's not going to happen if you don't believe that it's possible. And as Bance says, these guys have lost the mental battle before even touching a scrim because they've just accepted, yeah, the league is top heavy, we've got no chance. Maybe true, but you can't be saying that. And as Kenny says, being that mentally fragile is insane. I guess as long as you're getting paid, it doesn't matter if you're just the 5th best team. So that's the thing, right? Kenny's mentality. Like, let's say Kenny was actually on Boston this year, because he could have been with Slasher. Like, they would never have had the mentality that, oh, well, the other teams are pretty stacked, they've got good talent over there, I guess we'll settle for being the 5th best. Like, that ain't the mentality of the guys that actually win events. The mentality is, okay, sure, these guys are good, but we can be better than that team, we can be better than that team, and then if we're top 3, then we can actually make a run to win an event, make a Sunday, who knows what's going to happen at that point. So that is the correct mentality. Lots of these players just haven't got the dog in them, quite frankly, and well, these are the standings right now. I guess I'll just quickly have a look at what teams he could be talking about in terms of World Championship qualification here, because the top 4, we know the top 4. Surge have got better. Thieves still have their moments. I mean, look, they managed to slam Boston yesterday, but can't say I'm massively impressed with that. And they beat Gorillas in 5 the other day, so I guess congratulations. But when you get down to teams like Rocker, I think Heretics fall into this category, possibly Boston, Gorillas, Vegas, maybe Ravens. I want to think with the veteran talent on Ravens, they do have a bit more in terms of like actually bring in the heat, but I don't know, intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Cool to see Kenny as well hopping the Around the Bar podcast here with Hit, so that's coming out, I'm pretty sure today, maybe out actually by the time this video is going live, so something to watch just after this concludes. Just a couple of things to mention here before we close out the video. I thought this is kind of nice, just a throwback here to the esports report. This is how things used to be back in the day when, you'd get Puckett, they'd bring guests on, they'd have like hours of content to fill on MLG.tv. I know Puckett was actually talking about this to me at the event, just saying that they'd wake up, they'd turn up on the day, they wouldn't really know what they were going to do, what they were going to talk about, but, they would just run the show and make it happen, right? And, his courage of the early days, man, wow, that's crazy to think about, isn't it? So, yeah, as Puckett says, RIP Esports report. I do wonder whether we can get something to this extent back in COD. I know that it's never going to be how it was before, but there's definitely something to be said for learning from the early days, because when the CDL first came around, it seems to genuinely be their intention to pretend that nothing before it even happened. They didn't acknowledge the events and the matches and the championships and the storylines and the veterans and the great players and the champions of the previous era. They instead decided to pretend it didn't exist, and then when Karma retired, were not even really sure what to say, because in the CDL, Karma hadn't done much, has he? But of course, he was a 3-time world champion before that, so I think they finally learned and will probably continue to learn. But very much interested in your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.